Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the second lecture in our lecture series, Ancient Adornment. And today I have a practical announcement to begin with, which is that unfortunately our speaker this afternoon, Dr. Sarah Hollaender, her camera is not playing ball. So unfortunately, Sarah's camera doesn't work. So she will, the sound is very good, which is good news. But unfortunately, we won't be able to see Sarah's face as she gives her lecture. But I'm glad that Sarah is soldiering on and that she's willing to lecture for us even without a camera. So thank you for that, Sarah. I'm going to introduce our speaker properly now, but I just wanted to let you know about the technical challenges that we've had. But our speaker this afternoon is Dr. Sarah Hollaender. Sarah, she's a postdoctoral researcher at the Institute of Old Testament Studies at the University of Graz in Austria. Sarah's main research interests include ancient iconography, mythology, and gender and sexuality. In Graz, at the moment, Sarah is working on the iconography of the southern Levant in the Persian and Hellenistic periods. This research that she's doing is part of a collaborative project where the team is mapping the religious historical landscape on the basis of biblical and extra-biblical sources. Originally, Sarah has a PhD in classical archaeology from the University of Alberta. She got her degree in 2021. And the title of Sarah's dissertation was Portraits of Women as Goddesses and Heroines in Cross-Gendered Dress from the Roman Imperial Period. And Sarah is publishing her PhD dissertation as an article series. And one of these articles came out already last year in 2023. The title is The Clothes Make the Woman, Gender, Dress, and Virtue in Heroic Female Portraiture of the Roman Imperial Period. And it's published in the Yearbook of the German Archaeological Institute. It's available online. I'm sure that to the audience for the lecture today, this publication will be of interest. Sarah is a very active member of the European Association of Biblical Studies. She's co-chairing two research units. One is the historical approaches to the Bible and the biblical world, and the other is Jews, Christians, and the materiality of mortuary rituals in late antiquity. The latter research unit was launched this summer very successfully with 3 very full sessions. So Sarah's lecture today, this afternoon, is called Notorious Cross-Dressers, Restyling Hercules and Omphale in Roman Antiquity. And I'm so pleased to welcome you, Sarah. Thank you for being with us today. And I'm really sorry that your camera is not collaborating, but nevertheless, thank you for being here. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction and also for inviting me today to discuss my research on Hercules and Omphale. And of course, thank you to everybody in the audience for taking time out of your schedule as well. I think that Hercules doesn't need much of an introduction, but maybe you have not heard of Omphale before. So I will give a little introduction to the mythological narrative before moving on to the imagery. So one of the most notorious heroines from classical mythology is Queen Omphale of Lydia. In the literary tradition, she is characterized as a luxurious Easterner and as a dominant, emasculating woman. Her threat to social order is epitomized by her treatment of the Greek hero Hercules. This hero was either the queen's slave, captivated lover, or both. In the earliest version of the tale, Hercules was sold to Omphale to atone for a blood crime. She was so impressed by his heroic deeds that she freed him, married him, and even bore him a son. So the sense of inversion here was limited to the fact that a free Greek man had become enslaved to an Eastern female ruler. Beginning with the comic tradition, the hero starts to enjoy a luxurious sort of body lifestyle at the Lydian court. We see that by the 4th century BCE, the tale was also completely romanticized. Hercules was not forced into slavery, but apparently willingly enslaved himself to Omphale, due to his consuming passion for her. Just like in this marble statue here, Hercules and Omphale start to trade dress and roles. He wore feminine dress and did wool work, which is represented by the spinning implements in his hands, and she bore his arms, namely his club and lion skin, which you can see here. I cannot get into detail here, but suffice to say that the story of Hercules and Omphale was constantly rewritten to fulfill a certain purpose. Quite notably, though, literary authors typically compared historical individuals to Hercules and Omphale as a way of highlighting their shameful behavior. Politicians like the Greek Hercules or the Roman Marcus Antonius were apparently hopelessly enamored by Aspasia and Cleopatra, respectively. They were likened to Hercules under the sway of Omphale in a derogatory way. In the genre of elegy, Hercules serves as a mythological precedent for men falling prey to female beauty, but also as an ideal model for an obedient and dutiful male lover. Regardless of how elegy should be understood, it is clear that this genre openly flouted all traditional values, all social conventions, and so the idealization of Hercules' servitude was probably not considered admirable by most members of society. It is nevertheless clear that Hercules and Omphale frequently served as a positive mythical exemplar in the visual record. As I will argue today, the iconography of the pair was formulated in different ways in order to appeal to private feelings and also to highlight exemplary qualities. My talk will proceed in the following way. I will start by offering a brief introduction to the images of Hercules and Omphale. I will then turn to the cross-dressing motif, offering my own model. Finally, I will review their capacity to serve as positive mythical exemplar, briefly highlighting the culmination of this whole phenomenon, namely the private portraits of men and women as Hercules and Omphale. Images of Hercules and Omphale rose to popularity in the Roman period, especially from the late Republican period and into the Imperial period. They are primarily attested in domestic contexts, on wall paintings, tableware, and objects of personal adornment, but also in the funerary context on sarcophagi. They appear in other media as well, but this is a nice representative sample. It has been persuasively argued that images of Hercules and Omphale typically serve as an allegory for the powerful effects of love and wine. This is supported by three main points. First of all, Omphale herself is a beautiful, seductive woman. Her images highlight her aphrodisian appearance, which caused Hercules to surrender his club and lion skin to her. We see Omphale here unfurling the lion skin of Hercules, much like Aphrodite. Secondly, their imagery is anchored in the broader visual tradition of disarming love, that is, of Cupid's disarming mighty heroes at times on behalf of beautiful women. So here we see Hercules losing a battle against little Cupids, stealing his club and quiver, with Omphale gazing down on him, probably with amusement. Thirdly, they frequently appear as Bacchants or in Bacchic contexts. On this well, they are modeled after a satyr struggling with a maenad, just like all of the figures around them. A key feature of the iconography of Hercules and Omphale is cross-dressing. In fact, this motif is necessary for their secure identification in the visual record. Despite this, a systematic analysis of their dress codes, focusing on their body styling, garments, and, quite importantly for this lecture, accessories, has been lacking in scholarship. It turns out that the exchange of gendered dress itself is quite fluid. There was no single way for Hercules and Omphale to appear in the apparel of the opposite sex. I have developed my own model outlining the variety of patterns of dress, which I will present to you now step by step. It seems to me that Hercules and Omphale were continuously restyled in order to elicit certain reactions from the viewers. Hercules and Omphale are instantly recognizable as a man and woman respectively due to their contrasting body styling. So the concept of body styling goes beyond the natural body, exploring how bodies could be modeled by culture, also in gendered ways. Hercules has a hard physique, tan skin, and facial hair, whereas Omphale has a softer physique, pale skin, and also a feminine hairstyle. These are the most stable characteristics of their dress and serve to reaffirm the gender difference. Besides that, Hercules and Omphale imitate each other's dress patterns for different effects. Let's start with Hercules exploring the spectrum of possibilities. At one extreme, Hercules is completely dressed like a woman. He wears a long, flowing robe. He also has various accessories. He can wear a cloth head covering, like a veil, as well as slippers and jewelry. He can also hold tools for spinning, such as a spindle and distaff. He typically appears in the so-called women's quarters, basically an imaginary space for female activities. It's important to point out now that Hercules is a semi-divine hero who transgresses the normal bounds of human behavior and tends towards extremes. Despite the cross-dressing, his masculinity is never really imperiled. He is instantly recognizable as a man. His body styling betrays his virile identity. Moreover, the dress does not always quite fit properly. Against this background, the image of Hercules in drag, so to speak, was likely viewed in a humorous manner, as an inversion of societal norms. I think this is best exemplified by a wall painting from the house of Omphale in Pompeii. It's no longer preserved, but we do have descriptions and sketches from the 19th century, including this drawing here by Nicola La Volpe. Hercules sits spinning, much to the amusement of his female companions. In the words of John Clark, he is characterized as a failed woman, since he tries to dress and act like a woman, but he ultimately lacks the grace and femininity of his female companions. This composition formed the centerpiece of a tablinum, where the dominus traditionally received clients and conducted other business, but in general, this is a multifunctional room for representation. The presentation of Hercules' cross-dress and spinning offered a spectacle, serving as comic relief. Other images, which are outside my sample, like this mosaic from Lydia in Spain, conceivably served as a conversation piece as well. But Hercules is not always dressed like a woman. In other cases, the cross-dressing is at least partially downplayed, and he instead takes on Bacchic or soft accessories. He is situated in the world of otium, or leisure, with his beloved mistress or revelers. The focus shifts to the pleasurable life of the hero as a bacchant or male lover, transforming him into an exemplum felicitatis, or a model of personal happiness. This is best illustrated by a wall painting in the house of Marcus Lucretius at Pompeii. Hercules and Omphale appear in a Bacchic procession. Hercules is clearly intoxicated. You can see his blank stare quite clearly, but he is still relatively upright, supporting himself on his companion. Rather than feminine robes, he retains the markers of an ultramasculine hero. He is nude, showing off his powerful muscular body, which is the prerequisite for performing heroic labors. He is also given the markers of a bacchant, namely a thyrsus, so this staff in his hand, an ivy wreath on his head, and also a festive mantle falling around him. Hints of luxury and dandyism, including jewelry and slippers, are subtle. Overall, the iconography of Hercules was formulated in a way that preserves his status as an ultramasculine hero who is nevertheless capable of enjoying worldly pleasures. The wall painting formed the centerpiece of a triclinium, a site for conviviality and drinking in the Roman domestic context, for men and women alike. The evocation of Bacchic excess surely resonated positively with the viewers. This image allowed the viewers to identify with a hero who enjoys the world of otium. This is not an isolated case. The cross-dressing of Hercules is also toned down in images of the hero enjoying the company of Omphale or reclining like a symposius. On this intaglio, Hercules and Omphale are portrayed in a bust format, embracing each other, but the indications of Hercules' dress are quite minimal. It's not even clear if it's a robe or if it's a mantle. At the other extreme, the cross-dressing is entirely eliminated, and Hercules is portrayed in agonistic nudity, bearing his club and lion skin. he performs the heroic labors and then rests from his deeds with Omphale. The focus shifts back to the heroic character of the hero as an exemplum virtutis or an exemplum of manliness. This trend is best exemplified by a column sarcophagi, or a series of column sarcophagi, featuring Hercules and Omphale, produced in a workshop from Dokimeon between roughly 150 to 170 for export to Rome and Asia Minor. Here, Hercules performs his 12 labors for Eurystheus, which is appearing in different panels along the side. He retains his usual heroic costume, including his club and lion skin. On the short side, if you look to your right, you see that he is standing holding the apples of the Hesperides, which marks the end of his labors and hence his immortalization. He is joined by Omphale in the middle, modeled after Venus, and really bearing Hercules' archery supplies like trophies. So she's holding the quiver in her hand. This image was specially selected by the patrons of the sarcophagus, who chose it as a form of self-representation and to commemorate the deceased and their kin. Shown in this way, Hercules provides a fitting parallel for a husband as he strikes a fine balance between being a mythical exemplum of personal happiness and of manliness. So he's strong and courageous, but he's also deeply in love with his beautiful wife. The spectrum presented here is by no means rigid, and there is potential for blurred boundaries. It is plausible that the imagery opened up a space for the exploration of fantasies normally prohibited by societal norms. An excellent case in point are the images of Hercules and Omphale on mold-made ceramics, produced in the workshop of Marcus Perennius at the Retium between roughly 30 BCE and 60 CE. For convenience, I am showing a drawing of both sides of one vessel here. So the top part is side A and the bottom part is side B. We see Hercules dressed like a woman at the top, and below that we see Omphale wearing his club and lion skin, receiving wine from her male attendants, and also driving the hero in a procession of chariots. The iconography exaggerates the gender inversion, but also draws on Bacchic motifs, which are perfectly suitable for drinking vessels. It's basically modeled after the triumph of Dionysus with drinking vessels, centaurs, and also satyrs. The hero can serve as an extreme model for the pleasures of living, irrespective of traditional values and virtues. On the other hand, these kinds of role reversals in the world of otium leave the hero in an ambivalent position, oscillating between lighthearted comedy and wishful thinking. This intaglio with Hercules and Omphale embracing is also notable. Hercules is not cross-dressed at all, but the focus is not on his heroic deeds, rather it's on his loving relationship with Omphale. So to summarize, from the perspective of hegemonic masculinity, the more Hercules imitates Omphale's patterns of dress, the more he's established as an amusing spectacle. Conversely, the less he imitates her patterns of dress, the more he is established as an exemplum for traditional male virtues. So let's turn to Omphale now. In all cases, Omphale is cast as an exemplum pulchritudinis, an exemplum of beauty. She is typically modeled after Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, such as the Urania type, the Aries type, or even the Pudica type. This includes clothed and nude versions with different gestures and postures, highlighting different facets of her beauty. These different models suggest a disarming beauty that can fluctuate between overt eroticism and elegant femininity, also between power and delicacy. She is visually assimilated to other mythical prototypes as well, such as Maenads and sleeping hermaphrodites, in order to suggest ecstatic and voyeuristic aspects. Another crucial point is the exchange of gendered dress. At one extreme, the queen is shown as a conventional elite woman without the club or lion skin of Hercules. In these cases, her disarming influence is either downplayed or expressed in alternate ways. She may grasp the bow and quiver of Hercules, his supplementary arms, Or, as we've already seen, she can get Cupids to steal his arms on her behalf. There are a few options for portraying Omphale, the club and lion skin of Hercules. The first is to show her with sweet and delicate features, handling the arms, unlike Hercules, in a manner that subverts their combative function. It is possible to add modest features as well. She's established here as an exemplum ducadinus, an exemplum of sweetness. The intaglios depicting Omphale standing and gently inclining her head are a prime example. Hercules wields his club in an effortless manner in order to slay criminals and beasts. Omphale, in contrast, awkwardly supports the club over her shoulder with both hands. The accessory is unsuited to her weak and non-combative nature and is instead borne as a token of love. Moreover, Hercules uses the impenetrable lion skin as armor, whereas Omphale modestly drapes this hide around her body like a mantle. These ornaments were conceivably directed towards female consumers who may have considered this beautiful, disarming woman a model for success in their own love lives. This intaglio supports this hypothesis quite well, since the Greek name Nace is inscribed on it. The second option is to show Omphale with a firm demeanor, bearing the club and lion skin much like Hercules himself. Here, she's established as an exemplum fortitudinus or an exemplum of strength. This is especially the case when Omphale revels in her triumph over Hercules, because it can highlight the exceptional accomplishment of conquering the unconquered hero. Her imitation of Hercules' patterns of dress was valuable for transferring connotations of strength to an otherwise Venus-like woman. In other words, the hero's habitus was re-semanticized to express the power and victory of a beautiful woman, but in matters of love rather than heroic combat. A good case is the tub sarcophagus of the 3rd century in the Vatican museums. This shows Hercules and Omphale at the wedding of Dionysus and Ariadne. Hercules is hardly preserved, but it is clear that he lies on the ground and attempts to grasp Omphale. You can see his hand still grasping lion skin. Omphale stands confidently in front of him. She wears his lion skin over her head, and the preserved material suggests that she threatens the hero with his own club, probably in a sort of playful way. A few Cupids join her in this triumph, holding his archery supplies. In general, Bacchic imagery in funerary contexts served as an encouragement to enjoy life to the fullest, but it could also maybe express hopes for a blissful afterlife as well. In this context, female erotic power is celebrated as well. And we've already seen the statue in Naples, which is outside my sample, but clearly shows off the strength of Omphale as well. The third, but uncommon option, is to show Omphale as a female Hercules, deploying the club and lion skin to achieve the same aims as the hero. Most notable are the images of Hercules and Omphale on magical gems of the 2nd to 3rd centuries CE. Hercules, in the first example, throttles a lion with his bare hands, personifying the wildness of diseases. Omphale, in the second one, takes on a similar role. She appears as a plump, pregnant woman with a lion skin over her head. She is squatting and brandishing his club in the air too. Her target is an idiophallic donkey beneath her, standing from maladies and threatening the uterus next to the donkey. As such, Omphale is transformed into the female doublet of Hercules, though acting in the domain of sexual and reproductive health. In the words of Veronique Dassin, she is recast as a positive exemplum for, quote, a combative woman, pregnant, in control of her body, warding off malevolent influences with her own weapon. In this way, she serves as an exemplum virtutis for women in their everyday lives. To summarize, Omphale's beauty is always emphasized. The less she imitates Hercules' dress patterns, the more she's established as a model for traditional female virtues, like sweetness and modesty. Conversely, the more she imitates Hercules' dress patterns, the more she is imbued with his manly qualities. This opens up various possibilities. Her masculinization contributes to overall comic reversal, but can also cast her as a praiseworthy exemplar for female strength, especially in the sphere of erotic power, but even beyond that. So it's not just about possessing Hercules' club and lion skin, it's also a question of how she uses them. Just as the images of Hercules at the Lydian court could provoke certain fantasies, the same potential for Omphale is apparent as well. To summarize so far, images of Hercules and Omphale typically evoke disarming love and Dionysian pleasure. I've argued that they were constantly restyled to elicit certain reactions from the viewers. These mythical lovers not only offered some lighthearted comedy, but were strangely relatable. They appealed to private feelings like happiness and passion, and even embodied praiseworthy qualities in Roman society. The idea that people in Roman society could relate to Hercules and Omphale is strongly supported by the striking, but very rare, portraits of private persons in their mythological guise. But what is a mythological portrait to start? This is essentially the combination of a portrait head of a real individual with the conventional body of a mythological figure. Mythological portraits are predominantly found in funerary contexts connected to commemoration from the late 1st century CE till roughly the early 4th. Much ink has been spilled on the private portraits of couples as Hercules and Omphale, which I can't really get into here. Suffice to say that I follow the approach of Paul Zanke. In general, mythological portraiture served to highlight the private feelings of the patrons as well as the virtues of the deceased and their relatives. The point was to create memorials for the deceased, allowing them to live on the memories of their families, friends, and in their broader communities. Zanke highlights the beauty and modesty of the woman. On the one hand, she is modeled after Venus, the goddess of beauty. On the other hand, she modestly shields her genitals from view. She also bears the club and lion skin of Hercules, expressing her husband's love and metaphorical surrender to her. But I think that there's more to the picture here. She is certainly beautiful and modest, that's clear. But she also, I think, exhibits signs of strength. She is modeled after Hercules to a remarkable degree. She stands completely upright without shying away from the gaze of the viewer. Most notably, though, she interacts with the club and lion skin of Hercules, much like the hero. She wears the lion skin over her head like a helmet, knotted at the chest and draped over her arm. She also holds the club in the crook of her arm. Her imitation of Hercules' dress patterns lends her a powerful aura of strength. This surely served to underpin the evocation of disarming love. However, I think that the acceptability of strength in women formed the necessary social background for the creation of this monument. This brings us back to the concept of virtus or manliness, with strength as its defining quality. Virtus was traditionally ascribed to men, but it was perfectly admirable in women as well, at least under certain conditions. Women exhibiting virtus were treated as honorary men who surpassed the expectations of their sex by transcending gender categories. This manly virtue was ultimately directed towards maintaining the established social order and was also balanced by traditional female virtues. The portrait of a woman as Omphale was seemingly caught up in the same kind of balancing act. Ironically, her impersonation of Hercules reinforces her feminine gender. Her state of undress does not reveal the muscular physique of Hercules, but the physically weak body of Venus. The arms of Hercules are sufficiently masculine to cast her as an honorary man, but ultimately these draw attention back to her feminine body, and with it, her traditional social status and roles. To start, the hard, knotty club and rough, hairy lion skin outline her soft, smooth body to produce a sense of incongruity. Moreover, the paws of the lion grasp at her breasts with sharp claws, accentuating this feature and contrasting with her delicate skin. Finally, the lion skin has been made part of the pudica gesture, which conceals but paradoxically draws attention to her genitals. So her potential to exhibit virtus is inseparable from her womanhood and even incorporate into it. And of course, the celebration of virtus is also balanced by beauty, modesty, traditional female virtues. I will briefly touch on a portrait of a couple as Hercules and Omphale as a point of contrast. This monument is a unicum. The couple is hardly recognizable as Hercules and Omphale since neither is cross-dressed. Textual and visual cues are necessary to identify the pair. We see beneath their feet inscribed labels. Underneath the woman is Omphale, underneath the man is Hercules. The panel below also contains a bow and quiver beneath the woman and a spindle and wool basket beneath the man. So we do see the exchange of masculine and feminine accessories, which is crucial for the identification of Hercules and Omphale, but these accessories are physically distanced from the portrait figures. The focus is ultimately on the loving relationship as an expression of conjugal harmony. However, the man does not overtly surrender his weapons, and the woman is actually placed in a supportive and affectionate role, turning to her husband and touching him on the shoulder. The husband appears in the typical guise of Hercules to celebrate his virtus. His 12 labors are also narrated around the frame of the relief to reinforce that he has in fact reached the end of his labors. And the wife is shown as Venus to celebrate her beauty and modesty. As is often the case, furnishing mythological figures with portraits of real people required adjusting the myths and their iconographies to authorize a more personalized reading of the myth and also to guard the decorum of the individuals commemorated. The power of the mythical allegory to express passionate love is severely curtailed here, so it's not really clear what's left of Omphale and Hercules on this relief. But the mythological context was evidently important to the patrons. The image itself may be conventional, but perhaps fantastic tales of bliss and romance remain buried beneath the surface. And thank you for listening today.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for this brilliant presentation. And it's such an awesome case study, really. I hope you'll all join me in giving Sarah an applause, either a Zoom applause or a real one. And Sarah, will you stop screen sharing for a little bit, because then I can bring on the panel?
Sure, yes.
Thanks.
Better?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
okay.
There we are.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And now we have plenty of time for questions, for comments. And I have a question here from Helen Dixon. Helen, are you able to turn on your camera and post a question yourself? Oh, not at the moment. Okay, then thank you for the question, Helen. Then I'll just read it aloud. Helen says, thank you for an excellent talk. Can you say something about the frequency of the Omphale types you outlined? In particular, can you give a rough sense of how many examples of the sexual comparative fertility type, the example of the carved magical gem with the donkey in parentheses, you have come across?
Yes, thank you for your question. So in general, I think that looking at the corpus of these images as a whole, the options are pretty evenly distributed, because I think that they wanted to basically capitalize on all different possibilities in different contexts. But to turn specifically to your second question about the examples of sexual compatible fertility type, so basically this image of her playing the hero, this is, I would say, a demythologized version. So it completely is divorced from the mythological narrative, and she takes on qualities which are completely absent from the mythological tradition. So unsurprisingly, it's not super common. Mostly I just have these magical gems. There are some terracotta figurines which could fall into this category, but that's debatable, I would say. Something analogous to the magical gems, though, are images of Omphale modeled after Balbo. So these are like also small figurines, and they could be related to this function as well. The only other demythologized image of Omphale I know is 4th century contornians, which show Omphale, show Olympia, so the mother of Alexander the Great, with the club and the lion skin. So in a way identified as Omphale, but playing with this broader tradition of Alexander being associated with Hercules. So maybe a kind of deliberate ambiguity. I think that it is not so much focused on this idea of disarming love, but showing Olympias, like 8 centuries after her death, in a very powerful way. But thank you for your question.
Thank you. And Helen, please feel free to follow up if Helen is writing. Thank you so much. Very convincing analysis. Excellent. Thank you, Helen. And then Gillian Glass has a question or comment. Please go ahead, Gillian.
Hello, good morning from British Columbia. Fun to hear that you're a graduate from the University of Alberta. Thank you for your presentation. I apologize if this is incoherent, as it is not 7 o'clock here. I really enjoyed your paper presentation. I was not paying attention to the date and location on the artifacts you were showing, so this could be a completely inappropriate question, but I was wondering, as you are working in a department that does research with the biblical sources, if there starts to be in later antiquity a contextualizing or comparing or a syncretizing even between Hercules and Omphale and Samson and Delilah, another couple that results in the subordination of masculinity to the femininity, and some problematic interpretation and comparisons, and kind of like the Mark Antony Cleopatra Hercules Omphale thing of to be compared to Samson is to say that, well, you gave over your power to a woman. So there's that's sort of a vague question of whether they show up in similar contexts, or if there starts to be any sort of reinterpreting of the classic mythological motif in its later form. I also, because I have the humor of a teenager, was thinking that it might be fun at some point to use a title along the lines of, it's not the club that counts, it's what you do with it.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very interesting question. Actually, I never really thought about the possible connection, but I think one of the main.
Sorry, in case, yeah, no, I know the part that was missing in my mind is that Samson is also associated with lions. That was the key, and I know there is some scholarship out there, the titles and authors of which escapes me, that has tried to argue that Samson and Hercules fulfill a similar archetype of like the lion throttling archetype sort of situation.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And also, I think it's reflected in art, because I've seen an image of Samson in the Roman catacombs, which is basically modeled after Roman hunt sarcophagi. So I think it's completely possible there could be some kind of connection. Also, just this throttling move, but I haven't honestly looked into this in so much detail. I haven't thought about the possibility that Hercules and Omphale could be compared also to maybe biblical figures. The only one I know is that I think it was Origen who, in Contra Celsus, who says basically he complains because Celsus had compared, I guess, Hercules to Jesus, and then Origen says, well, that doesn't make any sense because Jesus is obviously surpassing him, and this is not a fair comparison, especially considering that he was subservient to Omphale. But to answer your question about late antiquity in particular, as far I've actually been interested in the potential, Christianization of the image as well, or what happens to it in a late antique Christian context. But I haven't found many images from that period. Have you? Or are you aware of some? That'd be really interesting, actually.
One of those people who is interested in the material world but not trained in it. I can't say I've seen anything that I remember. It's always that, maybe this is occurring to me because I have a vague notion that I saw it somewhere, but if I come across something, I'm happy to send it your way. I look forward to seeing how this all develops.
Well, I'm really excited that you tuned in from Canada. That's so cool.
How can you miss Hercules and Omphale? Come on. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Well, sounds like an interesting line of inquiry to pursue at some point. I've put myself on the list, Sarah, because I I was just wondering about the accessories aspect.
Mhm.
And I know you weren't able to show us every single depiction of Omphale that there is, but I was just wondering, is she actually ever depicted with the wool and spindle herself?
Omphale?
Yeah,
Actually, no.
but that's so interesting
Yeah,
that it's used as a signifier of Hercules as a failed woman, as you said,
yeah.
but she doesn't. I mean, it's cross-dressing, but it's not entirely cross-accessorizing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah.
This is sort of a maybe a internal logical error in the whole model I set up, because I say that Hercules imitates Omphale's dress patterns, and vice versa, Omphale imitates Hercules' dress patterns. But the irony is that basically Omphale has to be dressed like Hercules to be recognizable. So she doesn't have her own female, hardly has her own female dress pattern, besides, sometimes being shown as a conventional woman, but not spinning or anything. So
No, it's just a really interesting asymmetry in a way.
yeah, it is, yes.
I certainly wouldn't call it an error in the model, but just
Yeah.
just an interesting asymmetry in the way the genders are portrayed and mixed.
Yeah, and I think that another reason could be that, Omphale is a queen,
Hmm.
and therefore she's probably not spinning herself. And if you look at it in an intersectional way, then it's kind of logical that, yeah, she wouldn't have those tools usually, because she has her own servants do the work for her. So
That
yeah,
makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. We still have time for comments or questions. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to ask or make a suggestion. I actually have one more question, if it's okay.
Yes.
It was just about you mentioned this thing towards the end about the possibility for women to display virtus,
Mhm.
a successful manliness. And I was just thinking of, I think this, as I mentioned, I think this is an absolutely brilliant case study, and it opens so many interesting lines of inquiry and things to consider. And I was thinking from a theoretical aspect, um, it's becoming more and more common to think of masculinity and femininity as something that is continuously performed, and not something that is stable, something that you have or do not have, but something that you continuously perform and therefore have in the eyes of the people around you, but it's not stable. And
Yeah.
and I was just wondering if you see this as a case of exactly this, that in this material, um, the women's opportunity to sort of fill this role of being an admirable woman and performing a virtus, that's exactly a woman's chance of performing masculinity.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. The question's basically, you
If
want to elaborate on the theme a little bit more,
I was just
or
thinking, if you think that it fits, if your particular example fits into this theoretical frame of performing masculinity, so performing virtus, or being a scribe with virtus would be a case of a woman performing masculinity
yeah.
successfully in a socially acceptable way as well.
Yeah, exactly. So there's actually in the Roman imperial period a series of portraits which show women with different, let's say, masculine dress features or cross-gender dress, and they're most commonly shown, well, they're shown sometimes as Omphale, they're sometimes shown as warrioresses, sometimes as huntresses. And the interesting thing is that in all of these portraits, it's like basically a common thread throughout the whole corpus, is that they're always, kind of dressed like, sort of like men, or behaving a little bit like men, but not entirely. They're shown also in very womanly ways. So they're placed in supportive roles. They have gender blending features in their dress. So I think that even though women could be ascribed virtus and this was an admirable quality, there was always a little bit of hesitation to let them really cross over to being a man. So fully by their dressing and performance. So yeah, it is admirable quality, but there's some reservations about this, also reflected in the portraiture for women.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so last chance if anyone would like to ask a question to Sarah or Meredith Mulder, please go ahead.
Hello. I just wanted to say I absolutely love the lecture. It's fantastic. I am just starting to get into learning about, mythology, Greek and Roman stuff, and it's been a pleasure. I absolutely loved it. Great job. But my one thing is, I know about the basics of like Greek and Roman mythology and all that stuff, but I was just wondering, I've never heard of Ophelia before, and I was wondering like why her story is not more popular because she married Hercules, but this is my first time hearing of her, and I was just wondering why her story is not more like prominent in like modern media. If there's any reason for that, if there might not be an answer, but I was just wondering.
Thank you. It's a very, very interesting question as well. Yeah, so I think in modern media, I haven't seen her very much. The only case I know is a film, which is like from the 60s, like that, called Hercules Unchained, which is like one of these, epic tales that were popular back then in the cinema. Why she's not more popular? Well, I mean, Hercules was not just married to Omphale. He had like many different wives, many different lovers, and I don't know, maybe this is just one tale that is, I think, personally fascinating, but hasn't caught on with popular media nowadays. I'm not really sure why.
Someone should do something about that.
If I might rudely butt in, I wonder
Please.
how prurient Christian anxieties have to do with the avoidance of Omphale, because as our presenter has so wonderfully shown for us, there's a lot of bacchanalia going on. There's a lot of excessive drinking and sexing and all those sorts of things. And so when we think about the social influences, both in Europe and in mostly the United States, that result in a lot of modern media, those big epic Charlton Heston style movies and so on, there's a lot of anxiety about women being outside of their sphere, but also about showing too much, well, let's call it too much ankle. And so I wonder how much later values shift and result in Omphale being pushed a little bit to the side. But that's just a interruptive hypothesis.
Well, it's, I think, certainly a very valid one. And yeah, I think I could look into this more as well. Do you think about, Omphale, the reception of Omphale in modern times?
That would be really interesting. I have a question from pure ignorance. I was just thinking when you started introducing your model, and you mentioned this thing about the soft physique and the pale skin for Omphale, and the hard physique and the tan skin for Hercules. And you showed us one example of a statue where it seemed quite clear that Hercules' skin had been tanned red somehow originally. But what would the way of displaying pale skin be in statuary? Do we know?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, this actually refers more to the paintings. I haven't
Okay.
done any kind of polychromy analysis of the marble sculptures, but in the paintings, the contrast is very clear.
Yeah, no, I did. I noticed you had a really good example of that as well, where she's almost sort of ivory colored skin. Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, it's an interesting contrast and a very old one, of course, is many different civilizations, basically reflecting the idea that women are somehow more domestic and indoors, and men are more suited to being outdoors and therefore are more tanned by the skin. It's not universal, but it does hold true, at least in this corpus.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and from the ancient Near Eastern material, you see aspects of that as well, at least the color sort of reddishness of skin being associated with masculinity and outdoorsiness and strength as well. So I think there's certainly something there, not just in your material, but in the wider Mediterranean as well. So, sorry, Helen has a comment here that the sculpture. She's also noticed that it seemed to have quite a lot of color on the Hercules side.
Ah, okay. Well,
Yeah, it's
thanks
very
for pointing out.
interesting.
Didn't even think to look into that. So
Hmm.
that'd be another good step, I think.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
like it that we're just amassing more and more work for you to do on this, which is wonderful. This has been incredibly interesting. I just want to make sure I'm giving everyone a chance to ask a question or make a comment before we. Lucia, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just had one question. I came in just a little bit late, so maybe I just missed it. But I was wondering if there is any example of this myth with the cross-dressing and everything, that it has like a negative or mockery intentions or something like that, and not just like show the myth itself, but maybe the Romans try to, I don't know, make jokes or something about it. I was just wondering that.
Yeah, I did present this close to the beginning of my presentation, so you might have missed it, that there's generally because Hercules' masculinity is not really imperiled, he's not really at risk, and therefore the whole inversion is somehow humorous and a matter of comedy in the end. So basically for the hero, it's okay, even though men in Roman society would be a different case, basically, if they were to dress like this.
Thank you.
I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I was just wondering that because I came a few minutes late.
There is something absolutely priceless about the depiction of Hercules in the relief you showed us, where he's displaying the woolen spindle. Very obviously, he has this incredibly sheepish look to him, like he's like, but you can tell that it's supposed to be quite funny. I think it's a great example. We have a few minutes in case anyone would like to jump in with a final comment or question. I think weekend is approaching now. And before I ask you to join me in thanking Sarah for this brilliant lecture and discussion, I just want to make a little bit of advertising for our next lecture in the series, which is in exactly 2 weeks from today, on Friday, October 11. Again at 3 p.m. Oslo time. And here it'll be Dr. Bruno Biermann from the University of Münster, who will talk to us about Levantine seals between the material, sensory, and the social, archaeological, iconographic, and exegetical perspectives on beauty, power, and dress. So please do join us again in 2 weeks for Dr. Biermann's lecture. And then it is time to thank Sarah. Thank you so much, Sarah. We're sorry we couldn't see you, but we're delighted that we could hear you.
Yeah,
and
I'm sorry too.
well, you'll have to come back next time with camera. But thank you so much for your lecture. It was brilliant. It was such a pleasure to hear about this research. Thank you so much for being here with us. So, thank you.